In France, in forlorn contrast to America, Britain and Britannia's lion cubs beyond the seas. In contrast to the Anglosphere, in election season in France, they are at least permitted to try to move what they call the Overton window, or as they say in Paris, la fenêtre de Monsieur Overton. The net result after yesterday's first round is a runoff between everybody's favourite metrosexual globalist dinky boy, Emmanuel Macron, and what the BBC calls the far right, ooh, scary, Marine Le Pen. When we want to try to figure out what's going on in the French Republic and its lessons for the rest of us, we turn to the one and only Elisabeth Moutet. What do you make? What do you make? What should we take away from what happened on Sunday?
I think, there are many things, but basically what we've got in Paris is the end of the old and the beginning of the new, except that we do not know what the new looks like, but it helps Monsieur Macron. He has shattered to pieces both mainstream parties, the Socialists and the Républicains. People will tell you that they helped, certainly, but that was his aim from day one. When he ran 5 years ago as an almost unknown minister, he said that he wanted to be all things to all voters, en même temps, at the same time, from the Socialists on one side, from the Républicains on the other. The minute he was elected, he started shaving off personalities that were compatible to him, and he left the others battle against themselves as to whether they should play with him or not. And now we see the results. We've got two parties that are mainstream parties, parties that govern the country regularly until recently, the Socialists and the Républicains, and they are bankrupt. And I do not mean bankrupt in a metaphorical way. I mean, they really are bankrupt because they scored under 5% of the vote, and therefore they will not be reimbursed of their campaign costs, and their coffers are empty. I mean, they face annihilation. Champion in reverse is Anne Hidalgo, the Paris mayor, who scored 1.7% for the party that was François Mitterrand's party, but Valérie Pécresse did 4.7%, and that's not very good either. So Macron now says, I'm alone, and in face of me, as you said just before, is the beast, Marine Le Pen, the fascist. You know, is this such a choice? It's an interesting situation, but it's not a very democratic situation.
Well, I find that that's an interesting point you've made there, because as you say, Anne Hidalgo was down to like 1.7%. I mean, I'm reasonably confident that I could get more than 1.7% in the first round of a French election. I'm not even French. And the centre-right candidate, Madame Pécresse, she got, I think, 4.7%. But you credit Macron with destroying these parties rather than with Marine Le Pen and the rise of what the BBC and Le Monde all call the far right and the hard left. And it's Macron who's destroyed the mainstream, is it?
He always wanted to face Marine Le Pen, and until very recently, he didn't fear the hard left Jean-Luc Mélenchon, although a lot of left-wing votes feel it's a bit like it's like Jeremy Corbyn or Bernie Sanders on steroids. And if people vote for him, you've got all sorts of people who say, no, there needs to be a left-wing candidate. He came within 400,000 votes of Marine Le Pen. So that really is an interesting upset. So what he leaves us with is a guy who loves Putin and cried when Chavez of Venezuela died. And on the other side, we've got Marine Le Pen, who he thinks he can essentially beat anytime with his hand tied behind his back. That probably is no longer true. But he wrought that. He organized that. He made it happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. When you mention this guy, Mélenchon, who is basically like the Jeremy Corbyn of the French Republic, I mean, in a sense, had Eric Zemmour, the righter-than-right guy, held up a little bit and Marine Le Pen fallen by a point or two, we might now have a race between Macron and this guy, Mélenchon. So clearly, I don't. All this talk for years. Oh, France is moving toward the far right, the hard right, the scary right. But in fact, it's something more complex going on, isn't it?
It is, and pollsters say that about 1/3 of Mélenchon voters will vote for Marine Le Pen in the runoff. And the reason is that she and Mélenchon appeal to the same constituencies, and they are the constituencies of Brexit and Trump. They are people who live in places where there are few public services. They live in places where you need to take your car to do anything, to keep a job, to take your kids to school. Everything, the prices are going up. Marine Le Pen was very good in terms of cost of living issues. So was Mélenchon, because that's his natural thing. And he said 4 times during his sort of last, when they had the results yesterday in the evening, he said to his voters, he said, do not vote for Marine Le Pen 4 times, but he did not say vote for Macron, because he can't make himself say that. And he said it so many times because he's perfectly aware that it will be shown that some of his voters will vote for Marine Le Pen, and he wants to say, I have no part in this, it's not my fault.
Yeah, I actually was staggered by that, the way he basically reprised that as his catchphrase every 15 seconds in his speech yesterday. Because isn't it the case that if Mélenchon had actually said, I am not endorsing Macron, and that leaves only one other person in the race, and that is what is necessary to get rid of Macron, he would have really shaken up this race. But it seems that even he, a supposed change candidate, says, better the little globalist and he just walks away from it. That was a strange thing to do, didn't you think?
I will actually grant him sincerity on this one. He really believes that she is not somebody who should be in power. He doesn't like the right. He doesn't like the extreme right or the hard right or the reasonable right, however you want to call it. And I think on this one he was sincere, but I also think that he doesn't want to alienate. He doesn't want to. There's a legislative election in 40 days' time. It's going to be in June, and his party is going to score more votes, very obviously. Marine Le Pen's party is far less organized than Mélenchon's, and he doesn't want to insult the future.
Well, if we go back 20 years to when Marine Le Pen's dad first shocked the French establishment by getting into the final round against Jacques Chirac. Clearly, French politics has been in a phase of transition since Monsieur Le Pen 20 years ago. Is it actually possible for his daughter to win?
It is probable. It's a probability. I mean, I know bookmakers give it a 17%. I'd say 20%. I think there are many cases let me give you another fact that people don't think about so much. I would say also 1 big third of Éric Zemmour voters, granted that's fewer voters, will vote for Emmanuel Macron rather than let Marine Le Pen become president. And their vision is these are people who believe in creating a new right-wing party that will include the right of the Républicains, that will include, of course, the Zemmour voter, that will include a few other people who are sovereignist. And they don't believe in Marine Le Pen because she doesn't have so much a party as a family concern, and she's somebody who looks backwards. And she's somebody who hates people who look like they know things that she doesn't, and she fires them regularly. It's not run in a way that people who actually would like to have a nice party of government on the right believe in. That's not everyone, but there's also that concern from Zemmour voters and from people who voted from that part of the Républicain party, which is compatible with Éric Zemmour.
Well, I looked up the results in the commune I know the best in your beautiful country. And I was because it wasn't just that Marine Le Pen won, but that if you add in the votes for Zemmour and the other crazy hardcore right guy whose name I forget, that came to about 43%. Then there were 20% voting for this guy, Mélenchon, and Macron had about 15%. So all over the map, all kinds of apparently perfectly normal French people are voting for what the BBC damns as extreme, crazy candidates. I mean, if you don't have a Macron, next time round, then there are just the extremist candidates, and there is no Macron in between them.
Well, I mean, I would bet that commune in France that you know is in the south of France. Yes? Yes?
It's in the southeast. Otal.
Exactly. Exactly. That is Marine Le Pen. I mean, to be honest, I mean, I was not trying to sort of trap you. It really is exactly the structure of the vote that you expect in the southeast, PACA, Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region. And that's very typical. But all politics is local at one stage, and when we get to the legislative election, the concerns are going to be very different depending on region. And in that region, it makes perfect sense for them to vote like that. And you've got working class people who feel that they're not going to vote for the bosses and they're not happy with their lot. So that's understandable. There are other places in France, for instance, where the economic situation is not necessarily better, but the local interest and local structure are completely different. If you go not so far away from Provence, Alpes-Côte d'Azur, and you go to Midi-Pyrénées, and you've got people who will vote for Mélenchon but not for Marine Le Pen. In Brittany, you've got people who will vote for Macron. It's a complicated country, and I would bore people to tears if I started explaining, one region or the other. But it's, it makes it amusing, but it's plus compliqué.
Well, as you say, France is a complicated country. The UK is. It has 4 constituent nations, none of whom particularly like each other, as far as I can tell. But it doesn't throw up candidates like these. Do you find it interesting that this has happened in France, and there's no real equivalent to someone like Madame Le Pen or Monsieur Zemmour is basically the same autobiography as Boris Johnson. So he's a man who's been around the media, he goes on TV and radio, but Boris would never say anything like the stuff Monsieur Zemmour says. What do you think there would be a chance for this kind of populist politics, as it were, in the UK?
I think in the UK you have something that we haven't been able to achieve in France, which I personally regret a great deal. You have the Tory party, and the Tory party is 300 years old, more or less, and it is still recognizable as the Tory party, but it's enough of a big tent that you've got complete, the Remainer wing, and you've got people who absolutely are like Macron, and then you've got people who are close to Nigel Farage, but who are, you've got everything. You've got a right wing of the Tory party, you've got all sorts of things, but still they know what they belong to. They're not just their opinions. They also know that there's a political tradition, an old political tradition, and they live in that. And it's very different in France, where we don't have really a tradition of a big tent. Macron is now talking about creating a moderate big tent, and he's received with jeers from people who until then loved him. So that's also an interesting development. But I like the both parties in Britain, because the fact that you've got all sorts of opinion within a left-wing party and a right-wing party mean that at the end of the day you can have debate, and it remains relatively civilized. Not always, but it's much, in my view, somebody who likes democracy, it is much better than what we have here.
Well, I think there's a lot of British subjects who might disagree with you on that. But we'll leave it there, Elisabeth, and we shall watch the polls with interest, because the one thing we do know is it's going to be way tighter than it was 5 years ago. Merci, Madame Moutet. À la prochaine.